Part 2 with Alan Brochstein on the Dales Report.
So I know you get asked this question a lot. Update, what do you think, that where the Safe Banking Act, where does that sit right now? And is
It's
there
dead.
It's dead.
So it's totally dead right now. Everything's on hold till November. We'll get the election. If it remains status quo and the federal government gets back in business and not just working on pandemic issues, it could pass. I don't want to say it won't. Safe Banking Act is a smart thing. It's a step in the right direction. It's not a panacea. As it was written previously, it won't give cover to the exchanges. Mm-hmm. So what I'm hopeful is that if we get a Democratic Senate and they control the House as well, then we can see some improvement to that type of legislation, but it's next year's business.
What does this look like if, say, Joe Biden does win the Democratic Party, we have an election, the Democrats, like you said, win the Senate and control the House? That's a very hopeful thing, but I'm sure a lot of, great things that could potentially happen for this industry.
I want to back off. I don't think Joe Biden's that different from Donald Trump. Well, okay. I think Joe Biden and Donald Trump ultimately would go along with Congress on any sort of progress. I don't think either of them are especially friendly to the cannabis industry. I don't think Donald Trump is antagonistic. I think Joe Biden has been more antagonistic historically, but I think he is kind of boxed in and can't be. So any sort of bullishness that I'm conveying is solely on the Senate, really. I expect the House to stay Democrat, but I don't think it depends upon who's elected president.
I want to ask you a very important question. I'm not sure if you'll answer me straight up, but I'll ask anyway. Who are some of the players that are really grabbing your interest right now in the space? And if you are, let's say, an investor, I'm not saying you'd advise you to what you should and should invest in, but what are some of the players that, are continue to impress you quarter over quarter and that would grab your attention?
No, I like the way you asked that. A lot of times people ask me, what should people buy? I don't like to answer that when I run a subscription service. And, and besides, you say something today, and then tomorrow you tell everybody you should sell it because something changed. And then those people are like, hey, you said buy. So look, who's catching my attention? So there's 5 large billion plus market cap Canadian LPs. We can name them alphabetically: Aphria, Aurora, Canopy Growth, Kronos, and Tilray. Among that group, Aurora has really got my attention right now because I think people wrote that thing off for dead, and I don't think it is. So I don't generally like right now the largest LPs, but I do like some beneath there. So rather than name names of what I like, instead in Canada, let me just point to, I think if investors should be looking for companies with simpler business models. The big problem for these largest LPs is they were kind of incentivized to plant flags all around the world and become complex.
Right.
And now they need to they are all retracting. And so I think if you look beneath those big 5, that's where I'm interested. So that's Canada. And I also would suggest everybody thinks that the only way to play in Canada is through an LP, but there are retailers, and I follow a couple of them. They're on my revenue tracker. And I actually think the case can be strongly made that the future returns will be best for the retailers over LPs in general. There's a lot of LPs, very competitive, and there aren't that many retailers that can scale up. So then on the US side, same analysis that there's 4 really big companies right now, alphabetically: Cresco, Cureleaf, Green Thumb Industries, and Trulieve.
Right.
And I think all these companies are good. I have some that I prefer over others for very specific reasons, but I would just say I think people should be paying attention to all 4 of these. All of them have good access to capital. All of them have very high revenue that's growing. All of them have either they're close to profitability or they're already profitable. So that's easy. Now, when you look beneath, I think that there are some opportunities. It's similar to Canada, where there's too much focus on the largest ones sometimes. In the United States, I think you can find some smaller ones. But I mentioned earlier, and just to get back to this point, in the United States, we do have, unlike Canada, which doesn't have much of this, publicly traded ancillary companies. And I'll name all these because there really aren't that many that are trading on higher exchanges. So one that's not trading on a higher exchange is Kushco. So that's a publicly traded ancillary company. that could uplist. Their price is too low now. They'd have to reverse, but there's definitely a precedent for getting to the NASDAQ, and that company has talked about it. But the ones that are on the NASDAQ right now or New York Stock Exchange, there's two REITs. One is a pure play. Most people are aware of it, Innovative Industrial Properties. The other is only partially in the cannabis industry. I think it's really expensive, by the way. It's called Power REIT, but I mention it because it's in the group. Then you have, I don't want to miss any, you have Akerna, which is a software company. You have GrowGen, which is a hydroponics store that is very leveraged to the MSO space. And then one that I've been paying more attention to recently, just added to my focus list, is called Green Lane. And Green Lane they used to get the majority of their revenue from e-cig, and I did not want to walk down that alley.
Right.
So things have changed a lot from them with their Juul business really going into the toilet. Bad for their old shareholders. There was a $17 IPO that opened at 25 or something, bottomed out at $1. So the e-cig business going away, to me, is awesome. I love it because now it's a pure play pretty much on cannabis, mainly in the United States, but also in Canada and Europe. And it's a little bit different from Kushco. I kind of like what Kushco's doing better than Green Lane because they're more leveraged to the MSOs. So when I step back, you know, what I want to see as an investor, I used to be an institutional investor. What I want to see is this. Okay, I as an institutional investor can't buy Curaleaf or Cresco or GTI or Trulieve because they don't trade on the New York Stock Exchange or the NASDAQ. But I like them. What's the next best thing, and is it good? So I think these ancillary companies are the next best thing, and I think they're pretty good. And so I think this is going to be a big theme this year, and maybe we'll see more ancillary companies go public. I haven't really heard of much, except for there is one really big one, Hydrofarm. I think it is. But so we'll see how that plays out. And I left an important one out. I'm sorry. Scott's Miracle Grow. Scott's Miracle Grow has a business that did $670 million last year, and they're on track to do $1 billion this year. And I can't say it's 100% cannabis, but it's very much cannabis related. They're selling ancillary equipment. And so it's really been driving the growth of Scott's Miracle Grow, which is focused on grass, but a different kind of grass.
Good point. Thanks for pointing that out for sure.
And one more, if I could just get it in. CBD is tough right now, but that's another area. So I do have my eye on the CBD space because there's a good long-term story there. Right now, the market's terrible. The market's terrible because for a lot of reasons, but the main reason is a lot of competition. A lot of fly-by-night operators have come in, and the FDA is kind of taking its sweet time to weigh on things. But right now, the best CBD companies, several of which are publicly traded, are able to sell in places like Walgreens and CVS and grocery stores, but they can only sell topicals, and topicals are a small part of the market. And these just like I was talking about the banks, if a bank wants to bank, they can. They're taking a risk. Same thing. Walgreens could put oral products in, but they're taking a risk, so they don't do it. And so I think this is a next year thing. You never know. It could happen a little earlier. But I would point out, this isn't widely reported. There was a Canadian LP, unnamed, that tried to buy a publicly traded US company. And then could be the same one, it could be a different one, but Aurora just did an acquisition to get into the US CBD space. Kronos Group has done an acquisition of a private company, very expensive.
Well, that was kind of the resurgence of Aurora's run recently, right?
Yeah, I think that was a little bit of it. But so the point I'm trying to make is CBD beaten up, the shine is off the apple, I guess, as they say. But it looks like a pretty good entry to me. So these are the things I'd be watching.